Dear listeners, I ask you to listen to the story until the very end and be sure to write a review about what you liked and what needs to be changed to make it more interesting for you to listen to my stories.
I hear you.
I was never the kind of guy to believe in ghosts, curses, or anything remotely supernatural. My life was ruled by logic, routine, and an unhealthy dose of caffeine. That's why when I spotted an old flip phone at a garage sale, I didn't think twice about picking it up. $5 for a piece of nostalgia? Seemed like a steal. The guy selling it barely looked at me, just muttered something about clearing out his late brother's stuff. I didn't ask questions. Just paid, pocketed the phone, and left. Later that night, curiosity got the better of me. I flipped it open, half expecting it to be dead, but to my surprise, the screen flickered to life with a dull, greenish glow. No lock screen, no passcode. Just a menu that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. There were no saved contacts, no messages, nothing. I dialed my own number to see if the speaker even worked. As the call connected, a sharp static filled my ear, followed by a whisper. Faint, almost lost in the crackle. I hear you. I pulled the phone away, staring at it like it had just bitten me. Maybe it was interference, some leftover voicemail from the previous owner. Either way, it was late, and my brain wasn't in the mood for riddles. I shut the phone, tossed it on my nightstand, and went to sleep. The next morning, I woke up groggy, feeling like I hadn't rested at all. I brushed it off and went about my day, but something gnawed at the back of my mind. The phone. The whisper. By lunch, my logical brain had convinced me I was just imagining things. Still, I decided to test it. I called a random number. A local pizzeria. The second the line connected, the whisper returned. I hear you. I snapped the phone shut. My pulse hammered in my ears. It didn't make sense. No matter who I dialed, that same whisper bled through the line. Faint, steady, too deliberate to be a glitch. I tried resetting the phone, pulling the battery, even smashing it against my desk in frustration. But nothing stopped it. The damn thing just kept whispering. That night, I sat in my dimly lit apartment, staring at the phone like it was something alive. The air felt heavy, thick, like the walls were pressing in. I needed to clear my head. I grabbed my actual smartphone and took a quick selfie, trying to distract myself with something stupid. But when I looked at the screen, my stomach dropped. There was someone behind me. A dark figure, barely visible in the shadows. Featureless. Watching. I spun around so fast I knocked over my chair. The room was empty. Just the stale air and the low hum of the refrigerator. My breathing was ragged, my hands shaking as I checked the photo again. The figure was still there. Closer now. The flip phone vibrated violently on my nightstand. I didn't pick it up. I didn't move. But the whisper still came, slipping through the dark like cold fingers against my spine. Now, I see you. I wanted to believe it was just my mind playing tricks on me. Maybe the dim light, the grainy camera, or my own exhaustion had conjured up a shadow that wasn't really there. But deep down, something primal in me rejected that explanation. My apartment, which had always been just a place, for walls, a roof, a collection of things I barely cared about, suddenly felt unfamiliar, like I had unknowingly walked into someone else's home. The air was too still, the silence too thick, and the weight of something unseen pressed down on me, urging me to move, to run, to do anything but sit there frozen in my own fear. The phone continued to vibrate, an angry insect buzzing against the wooden surface of my nightstand, its cheap plastic casing rattling against the edge. I forced myself to take a step forward, then another, every instinct screaming at me to leave it alone, to get out, to put as much distance between myself and that thing as possible. But logic, or maybe just sheer, stubborn stupidity, won over. I grabbed the phone with a trembling hand and flipped it open. The call had already connected. I hadn't touched a single button. At first, there was nothing. Just the usual static, a faint hum like wind through a dead forest. Then, a breath. Long, slow, deliberate. The kind of breath someone takes when they're standing right behind you, close enough that you should feel their presence, close enough that you should be able to see their reflection in the screen. I didn't turn around. "You shouldn't have bought it," the whisper came, clearer now, almost conversational, as if whoever, or whatever, it was had been waiting for this moment. The voice was neither male nor female, neither young nor old. It was simply there, filling the empty spaces of my apartment, seeping into my skin like something wet and cold. I wanted to respond, to ask who they were, what they wanted, why this was happening, but my mouth was dry, my tongue heavy, and the words wouldn't come. Instead, I shut the phone with a snap and threw it across the room. It hit the wall and landed with a dull thud on the carpet, but the whisper didn't stop. I grabbed my real phone, my lifeline to sanity, and tried to make a call, any call, but the screen was frozen, unresponsive, as if the very air around me had turned thick and unyielding. My eyes darted back to the old flip phone, laying innocently on the floor, its screen still glowing with that sickly green hue. I needed to get out. I didn't care if I was being paranoid. I didn't care if I was losing my mind. My body had already decided for me, my legs moving before my brain could catch up. But the second my fingers brushed the doorknob, the lights flickered, and the phone rang again. Louder this time. More insistent. Like a scream trapped in plastic. And then, just as suddenly, the power went out. Darkness swallowed the apartment whole, thick and suffocating, pressing in from all sides like a living thing. My breath came in shallow gasps as I stood motionless, gripping the cold metal of the doorknob, paralyzed between two equally terrifying choices: stay trapped in this unnatural blackness with whatever had invaded my space, or throw open the door and risk stepping into something far worse. The phone's ringing cut through the silence again, its shrill, vibrating tone unnatural in the stillness, like a pulse that didn't belong. It shouldn't have been ringing at all, the battery was nearly dead, the kind that barely held a charge even when plugged in, yet here it was, screaming for my attention, demanding that I answer. I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing myself to think, to push past the primal terror clouding my judgment. The logical part of me, the one that still clung to reason, said to get out, to run, to leave the damn phone and never look back. But another part, the part that had already felt the breath of something unseen against my skin, knew it wouldn't be that easy. This thing, whatever it was, wasn't bound to the phone. The phone was just a doorway. I had already opened it the moment I made that first call. The ringing stopped. Silence filled the space where sound had just been, and that somehow felt worse. My pulse hammered in my ears, a deafening rush of blood that made it impossible to tell if I was truly alone or if something had moved closer in the dark. Then came the whisper. Not through the phone this time, but from behind me, so close that I could feel the damp heat of it against my ear. "Now I see you." The words slithered through my mind, each syllable stretching, bending, as if spoken by a mouth that wasn't used to forming human speech. A paralyzing cold seized my spine, my muscles locking up as something brushed against my shoulder, light, barely a touch, but unmistakably real. My stomach lurched, my mind screaming at me to run, to fight, to do something, but my body refused to obey. It was as if whatever this thing was had its fingers inside me, pulling the strings, keeping me still. Then, just as suddenly as it had come, the pressure lifted. The air shifted. The room felt empty again, or at least as empty as it could with the unseen presence still lingering in the shadows. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over myself as I spun around, expecting, dreading, to see something standing there. But there was nothing. Just the faint green glow of the phone screen, now lying face up on the carpet, its display flashing a message. "Don't turn around." A fresh wave of nausea rolled through me as my fingers trembled over the light switch, flipping it up and down in rapid succession, desperate for something, anything, that would bring back normalcy. But the power was still out, the darkness still absolute. My own apartment, the space I had lived in for years, was no longer mine. It had been invaded, rewritten, transformed into something alien, something hungry. And then, from the shadows, the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps. Not loud, not hurried, but purposeful. coming closer. Each step sent a deep vibration through my chest, like a pulse I wasn't meant to hear. It wasn't the sound of bare feet or shoes against the floor, but something heavier, something deliberate, as if whatever was moving toward me wasn't just walking, it was testing the space, feeling its way forward in the dark. My breath hitched, and my body clenched with the unbearable instinct to turn around, to see what was there, to meet the thing that had spoken to me. But the words on the screen still burned into my vision, glowing in that sickly green light. Don't turn around. I fought against the compulsion, squeezing my eyes shut as if that would somehow help, but the darkness behind my lids was just as thick, just as suffocating. My body screamed at me to move, to do anything other than just stand there, but every muscle felt locked, as though the very air around me had solidified. The steps grew closer, the space behind me tightening, the presence thickening, and then, silence. Complete, hollow silence, as if sound itself had been swallowed. The air changed, a shift so subtle that it might have gone unnoticed if not for the way my skin prickled in response. It was no longer just stillness, it was absence. The room behind me no longer felt like a room but an open void, like something had hollowed it out, leaving behind only the shape of space where walls and furniture had once been. The sensation was unbearable, like standing on the edge of a precipice with the certainty that, if I so much as twitched, I would plummet into something I wouldn't come back from. Then, a voice. Not a whisper this time. A breath against my ear, thick with something wet and knowing. You still don't see, do you? A force, cold, massive, unfathomable, pressed against my back, something impossibly vast and close, stretching beyond the physical boundaries of my apartment. It wasn't just in the room with me, it was around me, inside me, as if the space I occupied was bending, shifting into something else. My mind couldn't hold on to the sensation, slipping off its edges like trying to grasp a nightmare with waking hands. I forced my breath out in a ragged exhale, my fingers still gripping the useless light switch as though it could tether me to reality. And then I did the only thing I could. I moved forward. Not turning, not looking, just lunging toward the faint glow of the phone on the floor, reaching for it like it was a lifeline. My fingers brushed against its screen just as a low, vibrating chuckle rippled through the air behind me. The instant my skin made contact with the phone, the world snapped back into place. The weight lifted. The pressure vanished. Sound flooded back into the room, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant traffic from the street below, the soft creak of the floor beneath my own weight. The air smelled like my apartment again, stale coffee, old books, the faint trace of detergent on the laundry piled in the corner. The normalcy of it was dizzying, like breaking through the surface of deep water just before drowning. For a long moment, I stayed there, crouched on the floor, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles ached. The screen had gone black, but when I pressed the power button, it flickered back to life. No messages. No calls. Nothing but the home screen, as if the past few minutes had been nothing more than a glitch, a hallucination born from exhaustion. Except I wasn't hallucinating. The proof was there, staring back at me. The last photo taken, an image that hadn't been there before. I hesitated, my stomach twisting in a sick knot as I tapped it open, and my own face filled the screen. A self-portrait I hadn't taken, standing in the middle of my apartment, frozen in a moment I didn't remember. And behind me, filling the entire space where my walls should have been, was a black shape, featureless, shifting, as though the darkness itself had coiled into a form almost human, but not quite. And just below my reflection, in the warped distortion of its mouth, I swore I saw it smile. My breath hitched in my throat, my pulse hammering so loudly in my ears that it drowned out every other sound in the room. The photo stared back at me, mocking, undeniable. There was no trick of the light, no faulty lens effect, no rational explanation that my mind could cling to for comfort. The thing in the image wasn't just behind me, it was with me, around me, its darkness leaking into the edges of the frame like ink seeping into fabric. And that smile, it wasn't just some illusion of shadows. It was deliberate, sentient, amused. A violent shudder ripped through me, my entire body recoiling as though the thing in the image had just whispered directly into my bones. My thumb trembled over the screen, the instinct to delete the photo warring with the certainty that it wouldn't change anything. Whatever had happened, was happening, wasn't confined to a single digital moment. That image wasn't proof of something that had been in my apartment, it was proof of something that was still here. Watching. I shot to my feet so fast that my vision swam, my balance wobbling as I staggered backward until my spine hit the nearest wall. The impact sent a dull thud through the silence, a physical reminder that my apartment was still solid, that I was still anchored to something real. But even as I tried to ground myself, the air felt wrong. The room around me looked unchanged, my unmade bed, my cluttered desk, the dull glow of the street lamp spilling in through the blinds, but there was something beneath it all, a presence that had settled into the cracks of reality like a parasite. My phone buzzed violently in my grip, the sudden vibration almost making me drop it. The screen lit up with an unknown number, a simple private caller blinking against the darkness. My throat tightened. The rational part of me, the part that still wanted to believe in coincidence, begged me to ignore it, to throw the phone across the room if I had to, but my fingers moved on their own, my muscles no longer responding to reason. The moment my thumb tapped the screen, bringing the phone to my ear, I knew I had made a mistake. There was no voice on the other end. No breathing, no static, no distant hum of a poorly connected line. Just silence. A silence so deep, so absolute, that it felt like the very concept of sound had been erased from existence. It filled my head, pressed into my skull, hollowed me out from the inside. And then... click. Not from the phone. From inside the apartment. A noise so soft, so impossibly delicate, yet it shattered through the stillness like a gunshot. A door latch, unlocking. My stomach plummeted, the phone slipping from my grasp and hitting the floor with a dull thud. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to move, to run, to get out, but I couldn't tell where the sound had come from. My bedroom door was still shut, the closet untouched, the front door. It was open. Not fully. Just ajar, a mere sliver of darkness spilling in from the hallway. The chain lock still dangled uselessly from the frame, swaying slightly, as if something had just slipped inside. I froze, feeling a wave of cold run through my skin. This wasn't the usual chill of the night or a draft from the hallway. It was a different kind of cold, heavy, suffocating, almost physical, no matter how absurd it sounded. The air in the room had become denser, thicker, as if I were breathing something rotten, something frozen in time. The door wasn't just ajar. Someone was standing there. I couldn't see them, but I felt them with every fiber of my being. This wasn't just a presence, it was attention. They were watching me. Studying me. My legs refused to move, my lungs couldn't draw in air. I tried to find an explanation, maybe I'd forgotten to lock the door? Maybe it was the wind? Maybe. Then it spoke. The voice was soft, almost gentle, but from it, a wave of pure panic ran up my spine. Now I see you. Everything happened at once. The lights flickered, the shadows in the corners of the room grew thicker, more solid, almost alive. I rushed to the door and slammed it shut with such force that the pictures on the walls shook. But I knew, it wouldn't change a thing. The phone still lay on the floor, the screen flashing, showing an incoming call. But there was no number anymore. Just one word. Closer. And then I understood. The door had been an illusion of safety. It was already here.